Sien van God, doen het nog een keer. Oh, Jesus, doen het weer. Oh, Jesus, doen het weer. Ja, hier die geslag moet
Hartlik welkom weer saam met my, Andries Besuidet by ons program Jesus doen het weer. En hier waar ons weer aan gaan met my broer Andrew se getuienis, hoe die Here vir hom deurgekom het. Hoe die Here vir hom beskerm het met hierdie dinge wat hy mee besig was. Soos u weet van die vorige 2 opnames, het hy groot geword die basies in Suid-Afrika en as 'n enkel kind het hy nooit die Here geken nie. En hoe hy net eenvoudig besluit het, hy gaan maar die wye wêreld ingaan. En hy toe Europa toe gaan het, en hoe hy by die hippie akkult begin betrokke raak het, en by dwelms en al hierdie verkeerde dinge begin betrokke, wat hy gesien het as reg, want hy het nie geweet nie, van wat is anders reg nie. Hy het geglo daai tipe lewe is goed genoeg, is reg. So, Andrew, so much appreciate you, my friend. Really, we
Thank you, brother.
are so glad to spend so many times with you, and that we know that God will be uplifted with this testimony.
Absolutely.
All right, I know we end up, you and Jeannie were on your way with this hippie van, the VW.
The VW.
Was it
a
the split window one?
And no, it was the one after that. It was a 1972 model VW van, which we converted into a camper.
So now you're on your way. Okay, where to?
Yes, we traveled right across from Montreal. We left there and we traveled right across Canada to Vancouver. And there we met a whole lot of people, and we went to watch one of my favorite bands, which was known as the Steve Miller Band, which you don't hear about today. I think they stopped recording together a long time ago. Anyway, it was a wonderful concert. And from there we went down the west coast of Canada, all the way, and eventually we got to the Mexican border. It was in America and Canada. No. Oh dear.
But okay, go on. So after Canada, you went through to, and you end up at the Mexico border.
Yes.
And what happened there?
We traveled down the west coast of America, obviously, and after Vancouver, and we got to the Mexican border. And there, of course, my South African passport caught up with me again, and they wouldn't let me in because of my South African passport, and we knew that before we got there. So I took a British identity card, and I made it look like I was a British citizen. And we managed to go through the border from that time. And we went into Mexico, and we were camping on a mountainside, and we found a Mexican wild dog, and he became part of our family.
A puppy.
A puppy, yeah. We called him Pedro, and he grew up with us, and he traveled all right through Mexico and down towards Nicaragua, Panama, Costa Rica, and Panama. And when we landed up in Panama, we had absolutely no money left. And once more, I sent a telegram to my dad, and he paid for a trip on a passenger boat to bring us back to Europe. It was very cheap in those days. It wasn't expensive. So he was able to provide the money for that. And we traveled home, and we smuggled the dog back with us we drove from Italy, we drove across through France, and then took a ferry across to Britain, and we had to smuggle the dog in Italy and into England, because they would have taken the dog away from us, and we would have had to pay a hefty fine. So we landed up back in Wales, full circle, at the house that we had been living in on the Farmer Jones's land. We eventually rented that house from him, and we got back there, and on Christmas night, Ginny gave birth to our son Christopher, and we put him under the Christmas tree with a big blue bow tied around him, and we thanked all the gods for bringing us home safely. When I say gods, I mean little gods, not the God. I still had no knowledge of God then whatsoever.
Andrew, and okay, so then what happened after that? I know I want to, cut out quite a lot of stuff.
Yes.
So when did you came back to South Africa?
Yes, in 1977, my father died unexpectedly in South Africa, and being an only child and being the only living relative of his, I had to fly home to South Africa and to sort out the estate. And of course, because I was an only child and because there was no other living relative, the whole estate came to me, and I inherited what was then R250,000.
That's a lot of money at that time.
250,000 Rand I inherited then, which was a lot of money indeed. Some of it was tied up that couldn't be spent according to the will. So 100,000 Rand came to me, and I decided then that I would realize a lifelong dream of sailing around the world, building a yacht and sailing around the world. And I would then use the money that I just inherited from my dad to build this yacht.
You came back to South Africa without Ginny.
Yes, we had become estranged by that time, and unfortunately I was unfaithful, and I had an affair with another lady, and so we weren't on very good terms, and our marriage was quite broken by that stage. And so we were estranged. So I asked her if she wanted to come back to South Africa with me, and she said no. She couldn't imagine living on a yacht with 2 young children. So then I decided no, then I'd have to leave them behind.
So we're going to cut some stuff out now. Now I wanted to know, where was it and when did your paths cross with the Lord Jesus Christ?
Well, now we come to the climax of the story, of my story, which is actually his story, because he was running the show behind the scenes. I had no awareness of it whatsoever. By a series of coincidences, he led me to a Christian family called the Glanvilles, and the son of the Glanvilles there was called Richard, and he was the architect of the boat. He designed the boat, and when he showed me the plans for the boat, I signed on the dotted line immediately, because it was a design that had never been used before. So the boat that I built was the first of her kind in the world, and I named her 707 after the first jet airliner. But little did I know that it was going to take 2 years to build this boat. So I was still involved with drugs and the occult. I hadn't changed in any way at all, just perhaps a little bit older and maybe a little bit wiser, but really not much.
Sorry, I want to stop you quickly. You were a hippie, and how long, at one stage, I remember you were driving around on a Triumph, also motorbike. At one stage you had one.
Living in England.
That's it, yeah. Yes. But how long did your beard and your hair got?
My hair was right down to the middle of my back, and my beard was blood red and halfway down my chest. So I looked like a pirate.
All right, let's go on. And then now with this boat?
You can see it's turned white now. But then in those days it was blood red. So I took the opportunity when I found out that it was going to take 2 years to build the yacht, because we started from scratch. I invited Ginny over to come and see what I was doing, and she flew with our 2 children over to meet me in Cape Town. And we lived in a caravan on the property of Richard's family while we were building the boat. In fact, the big shed that we built the boat in was right next to the caravan. So she came over to visit me, and what I wanted to do was to reconcile with my marriage, because we were still married. I only divorced her later on, or she asked for a divorce. So despite me being able to save the life of my very young daughter, who fell into a swimming pool while we were asleep one afternoon, and for some reason I woke up and ran outside, and there she was lying on the bottom of the pool, and I saved her life. But despite that, it appeared that our marriage was never going to work again. As you can imagine, after being unfaithful to her, this did not go down well. So they spent about a month with me, and saw what we were doing, and it appeared that we would not be able to reconcile our marriage. And so she flew home to England, and I was left alone then to carry and finish with the project. So the boat was eventually built, and all the glitches were taken out, and she was launched at the yacht club in Cape Town near the end of 1979. Well, it was actually 1978. It was towards the end, so it took nearly 2 years to build it. And she was launched, and she quickly became the idol in my life. I idolized this boat. It seemed like all my plans and dreams were coming true, and that I was going to be able to literally travel around the world on a boat that I had built. So I was very excited, and she was my idol. And so eventually we started doing sea trials, and once the sea trials were finished, and she was the people were amazed by this yacht that was a completely different design, but I don't want to waste time going into that. It was a brand new design called a cat rig schooner, and the yachting fraternity were amazed by it. And as we finished with sea trials, I decided that we were going to sail away to the Caribbean. I had advertised in the South African press and the British press for some crew to come over, and so we had done the sea trials on the boat together with the crew, and we now come to the middle of 1979, and we were about to leave for the Caribbean, and the boat was then, in those days, you couldn't bring a boat into Hout Bay Harbour. So I was anchored in the middle of Hout Bay, the bay at Hout Bay, anchored on a mooring, and we were about to leave for the Caribbean. We were going to charter the boat to rich tourists and earn our living like that. We were going to go and leave to the Caribbean the next morning. So the boat was at anchor in the middle of Hout Bay, and she was kind of restless. I could feel she wanted to go somewhere, and I was so excited, and I also wanted to go somewhere. Don't ask me why, but I think, as I said at the beginning of my book, the Lord said to Cain, "You will be a restless wanderer on the face of the earth," and he said, the punishment is too much for me, because there was a lot of heartbreak and a lot of things left behind to achieve this boat that had now been built and to realize my dream. There were many broken hearts and ruined lives left in my wake. So it was very difficult, and I understood why Cain said his punishment was too hard for him. Only afterwards, though, I didn't understand then. I knew nothing about it. So I was at anchor on the boat the night before we were to leave, and all my crew went ashore to say goodbye to their friends and family, and I spent some time getting the whole boat shipshape, ready to leave the next morning. And I went downstairs and I fell asleep in my cabin. Round about 11:30 at night, I woke up with a fierce wind that had come over Constantiaberg, an east wind that is known to tear fishing boats off their moorings, came howling over Constantiaberg, and I woke up in a panic. And I rushed up onto the deck, and the winds were howling, and it sounded like all the demons from hell going screeching overhead. And I was very scared and very frightened. But the wind was so strong that I quickly went back down inside the boat, and I sat down on a bench in the saloon on the boat, and I had with my head in my hands. And I was just thinking, what on earth am I going to do now? Because downwind of where I'd anchored the boat, downwind was the Hout Bay Harbour wall. And had she broken off her mooring, she would have been destroyed on that wall, broken to pieces. And I had no insurance at all, because by then I'd spent all the money, as you can well imagine. And there was no insurance, and I had all my eggs in one basket. So I was very, very frightened and scared, and I thought that I was going to die. So there I am sitting in the saloon at 12 midnight. And suddenly I looked up and I said in a loud voice, if there is a God in this world, please will you help me now, because I feel like I'm going to die. And at that moment, a book in the bookshelf caught my eye. It was a small paperback book, and down the spine of the book were written the words, The Jesus Story. Now, I had no connection with Christians at that time. None of my crew were Christian, and I was very far from Christian. And it was amazing to me that there was a book called the Jesus Book on this bookshelf, and it was like I could see it clearly, despite the fact that it was quite dim. So I was intrigued by this. I had no idea where that book came from. So I got up and I pulled the book out of the bookshelf. And at that moment, the wind changed direction slightly, and the boat lurched, and the book fell out of my hand onto the table, the galley table, and it opened at the book of John, chapter 3.
Wow.
It fell open at chapter 3 of the book of John. And so I started reading. And there in John 3:3, I saw that Jesus says, I am the gate. Anyone who wants to enter into heaven will have to come by the gate. That's the only way that you can get there. And I was wondering, what on earth is he talking about? And then I got to verse 16, and I read these famous words, for God so loved the world that he gave his one and only Son, that whosoever should believe in him would not perish, but have everlasting life. And I felt like Jesus was speaking directly to me, because I felt like I was dying, that I was about to die, that my boat was about to be smashed to pieces, and that I would probably be drowned. And here he said, for God so loved the world that he gave his one and only Son, that whosoever should believe in him would not perish, but have everlasting life. And then I carried on. For Jesus did not come into the world to condemn the world, but to save the world through him. And these words struck me to the heart in a more powerful way than any drug experience I'd ever had, or any occult experience, or any knowledge that I'd ever had in my life. The words of John 3:16 struck me to the heart. And I knew that this was the truth that I had been searching for all my life, because I forgot to mention earlier, Andres, that what was motivating me to go on these journeys, all of these journeys that I went on, I was looking for absolute truth. I remember once asking my father, is there an absolute truth that I can live my life by? And he said, the only absolute truth that I know is mathematics. And of course, I was really bad at mathematics. I wasn't intelligent enough to really understand mathematics. I didn't really know what he was talking about, but he was a highly intelligent man, and he eventually became a mathematics teacher at a high school before he died. And so he said to me, that's the only absolute truth that I know. And so here I found, later on, as I read the book of John, Jesus was saying, I am the truth, the life, and the way. And nobody comes to the Father except through me. And I knew immediately that that was what I'd been searching for all my life. And that God himself had led me to this experience, to this moment in time, where I could discover that the truth was never your truth or my truth or a book or anything like that. I found out, or I discovered, that the truth is a person, the very person of the Lord Jesus Christ. Amen. And so I knew that I had come home to God. Absolutely, then and there, in the middle of the night, in the middle of that storm. And then Jesus, after I'd finished reading the book of John, I finished the chapter, Jesus immediately started speaking to me in my mind. And he said, now you have to get into the harbor because it's very dangerous where you are. And he gave me the whole plan of how to get the boat into the harbor, because I didn't realize, I thought the engine that I had in my boat wasn't strong enough to move the boat against this howling wind that was blowing. But he showed me how to do it with a plan. The wheel and the controls for the engine were right at the back of the boat. And he said, you must go up. This is in my mind. He spoke this, something that never happened to me before. There was somebody speaking to me in my mind, like an idea, a thought, but I knew it wasn't my thought. And he said, start the engine, put it into gear, run the boat forward. Remember, I was facing straight into the wind because she was pulling on the anchor chain. Run the boat forward, put it back into neutral, run the length of the boat, which is 54 feet, of quite a long way in the dark, in that howling wind, because the rope had then been slackened, and I was able to untie it and throw it into the sea, and then run back to the back of the boat and put the engine into gear again, and to somehow get the boat around and into the harbor. How that happened, I can't rightly tell, but before I knew what was happening, I was tied up next to a fishing boat in the harbor.
Wow. Right, our time is running out, but now I just want to cut out quite a lot of things again. At one stage, you went out to which evangelist?
No. What happened was, I didn't know what to do after that night. But then I suddenly remembered that that Richard was a Christian. So I went to see him immediately. And he looked up and he said, something's different with you, Andrew. I said, yes, I'd met Jesus last night. Wow. And I asked him, well, what do I do now? He said, well, I'm a Methodist, but you can't come to our church because you are too noisy. You are too loud. He said to me, you better go down to the Assembly of God. And there, through an amazing process, he told me to go there on a Sunday night, and when I went in there, they welcomed me in because it was the middle of the hippie revival at that stage in 1979, and the pastor on the stage was preaching a message, and it sounded like it was just for me. And then he stopped during his sermon and he said, God is telling me that there is somebody in this audience that has been waiting for years. And would you like to come to the front and give your heart to Christ? And so that's what I did. I went to the front. I was convicted of sin and unrighteousness and gave my life to Jesus.
Since then, your path is all the way with Jesus.
All the way and nothing but.
Andrew, thank you so much. Really. Ek glo u daar wat vandag na dit kyk, besef net, en ek wil vir u vra, gaan lees daai boek, en as u nie seker is nie, dan gaan kontak u my, en ek gee vir u dan die gegevens deur, gaan lees die boek, en dat jy baie meer kan hoor, want ons het so baie uitgesny, maar werklik, die Here het vir Andrew Righthouse so beskerm al die jare, en ons gaan nou vir u groet, tot die volgende keer, ons sê vir u totsiens. You can greet the viewers, Andrew.
I want to thank you once again for your time given over to listening to the story. And if you have difficulty on lulu.com, you can phone me, and Andries will supply my phone number, and I will tell you exactly how to download the book for free off that website. Thank you very much for your patience and for listening to the story.
O Jesus, doen dit weer. O Jesus, doen dit weer. Ja, hierdie geslag moet erken dat U regeer. Seun van God, doen dit nog 'n keer. O Jesus, doen dit weer.